The Miracle of the Leaves. Pedro was 9 years old, but the maturity he displayed far exceeded his age. Living on the outskirts of the city of São Paulo, Brazil, with his mother, Ana, and 2 younger brothers, he knew the hardships of life like few others. His father had left when he was still very young, leaving Ana with the arduous task of supporting the family alone. Ana worked tirelessly, leaving home before dawn and returning late at night. The income he earned barely covered basic needs, and the family often went through extreme difficulties. Pedro, as the eldest, felt an immense responsibility to help his mother and take care of his brothers. He was a sensitive boy, with eyes that reflected precocious wisdom. Every morning, after making sure his brothers were safe, Pedro had a ritual. He would leave the house and walk to the neighborhood bakery. It was a simple bakery, but for Pedro, it represented a world of dreams. He stood on the other side of the street and watched through the window. Fresh breads, cakes, sweets, and savory dishes, all organized in an inviting manner. Pedro never dared to ask anyone for anything. He knew that his mother struggled to put food on the table and that any extra spending was a luxury they could not afford. Still, he daydreamed. He imagined buying a sweetbread, a piece of cake, and sharing it with his brothers. The owner of the bakery, Dona Angela, was a middle-aged lady, always with a kind smile on her face. She noticed Pedro from the first day he started appearing. He watched the boy standing still, with his eyes of desire on his window. Without wanting to invade the boy's privacy, and without being sure what it was about, she just continued her routine. But she couldn't get Pedro's image out of her head. On a particularly cloudy day, Dona Angela finally decided to act. She saw Pedro across the street, as usual, and felt it was the right time. He got up from his chair behind the counter and, with a soft gesture, called the boy to come closer. Pedro, initially afraid, hesitated. He didn't want to cause trouble or seem like he was asking for something. However, Dona Angela's welcoming expression encouraged him to cross the street. As he got closer, he kept his head down, embarrassed and nervous. Dona Angela looked at him tenderly and said, "Boy, from today onwards you will enter this bakery every morning and order whatever you want at the counter, and I want to receive my payment in tree leaves. If you get a cake, I want 1 sheet, but if you order a cake, a liter of milk and a loaf of bread, I want 3 sheets, and so on." Pedro, confused, didn't quite understand, but nodded his head in agreement. He knew it wasn't a fair sale or exchange, but he just accepted, perhaps because he wanted it so much that the proposal couldn't be refused. On the first day, he ordered 4 loaves of bread, 1 for each member of the family, and a small chocolate cake. He went to the checkout somewhat embarrassed and whispered to the owner, "I'll be right back with the leaves." Dona Angela smiled and thanked him as she watched the poor boy run away happily towards his home. As soon as the boy returned with 5 beautiful green leaves, he left them on the cashier's counter and ran home. This happened for a few months. Every day, the boy came, said a shy good morning, and left with some fresh food and left the leaves on the counter corresponding to what he ordered. One day, he even brought his younger brother to meet the kind lady who presented them with those foods daily. Dona Angela never wanted to bother the children with questions. She just gladly helped and made them feel at ease. As a little girl, she had had a difficult childhood and knew exactly what it was like to feel humiliated. For this reason, I preferred discretion. Time passed and everything was going well, but a concern suddenly appeared and distressed everyone in the bakery. Pedro hadn't shown up for a week. On the morning of the 8th day, Angela, worried, personally went to Pedro's house. After observing part of her routine so much, she ended up discovering some information about where the family lived. Arriving there, she found the old house completely empty, which left her amazed and worried. A neighbor, noticing Angela's expression, approached and said, "My lady, don't you know what happened? In this little house, falling apart, lived Mrs. Anna and her 3 children. She was always a very strong and hard-working woman, but she always needed help. A few days ago, she lost her son Pedro to a very rare disease. We were all very sad and tried to console and help as much as we could, but poor Anna took her 2 other small children, a bag of clothes, and disappeared. Nobody knows their whereabouts. We are all very worried. Angela was so shaken by the news that she almost fainted. She was taken to the hospital to take tranquilizers and undergo heart tests. News like this is something we never expected to receive. Angela needed psychological treatment and was away from her own bakery for about a year. Returning to that place was not an easy task for her, as she couldn't stop thinking that that poor boy, from whom she had already developed so much affection, would never give her leaves or a shy smile again. Years passed and life moved on, but Angela never forgot this sad episode. One day, returning from a routine appointment, Angela was surprised by 2 robbers armed with a pistol who demanded his cell phone and money. Panicking, she tried to grab the things to give them before something worse happened. Suddenly, one of the robbers exclaimed to the partner next to him,
"No."
"She does not." The partner, confused, questioned the reason and immediately got the answer. "When I was little, this woman fed me every day. Once my deceased brother took me to see who he was, and I never forgot that face." Angela, looking shocked, began to shake and cry a lot. Surprisingly, he received a hug from the robber, the younger brother of the deceased Pedro. At that moment, the young man regretted living that kind of life. He handed his gun to the colleague next to him, who fled, afraid of having been seen by someone. The young man knelt on the ground in front of Angela and repeatedly asked for forgiveness. The kind woman forgave him and, in tears, said how much she missed Pedro. As he bent down to lift the boy off the ground, he dropped a package he was taking home, a slice of cake and 3 fresh loaves of bread. Excited, they both paid little attention to the things that fell to the floor. Hugging each other and trying to understand the reasons for life, they were surprised by a strong wind from the tree next door, for leaves fell and rested on the piece of cake and the bread. At that moment, they both turned to each other with faces of astonishment and said almost synchronously and with trembling voices, "Pedro." Both there, they witnessed the miracle of the reunion that saved a young man from a future of crimes and freed Angela from a deep depression. She knew that, somehow, Pedro was nearby, and the younger brother abandoned the injustice, gaining another chance at life. This is a real story. Part of it has more than a dozen witnesses, and part of it only witnessed by 2 people or 3. The leaves on the bakery counter have become a legend in the community, proof that genuine kindness can transform lives, even in the most difficult circumstances. Never again have fallen leaves from a tree had the same meaning in these people's lives. Someone once said that God changes leaves out of kindness. Nature is alive and brings life.